There are many cool bikes, but retro bikes are particularly cool. They're cheap, they're practical, and obviously they have that retro nostalgia about them. Over the past few years, I spent my time restoring, restomodding, and reselling these old bikes. So naturally, I follow a whole bunch of social media about it, and I saw this post on Reddit the other day, and it got me thinking, why aren't people realizing how many options they have? So here's the list of bike types that are perfect for restoring and restomodding and doing it on a budget. Now, I have already owned all these types, so I'll give you some tips. Why I think they're cool, what kind of mods I would do on them, and what to watch out for when buying them. So first off, I would look at department store mountain bikes or all-terrain bikes. Now, before you click off, let me explain. These bikes were cheap back in the day, and they're even cheaper now. You can pick them up for free. They come in two types of flavors. They're either a no-name brand where you're like, what the hell is that? Or they were brands that were pretty cool back in the day, 80s, early 90s, but then bought out by the department stores and just ran into the ground when it comes to quality. So most of these bikes have pretty crap components on them. Some are okay, but mostly they're pretty rubbish. To make it up though, they used to make pretty funky frames, and that's what you're looking for. Funky frame that you can then hang off whatever parts you have and make a pretty cool cruiser. These are perfect pub bikes, so don't dismiss them. Now, what I would look out for, obviously the frame, find something that's your size, funkiest colors, and then don't worry about components so much. Mods I would do are your usual, put big chunky tires on them, and then pretty much go to town to suit your tastes. I've done this bike before and just slapped on a whole bunch of stuff that I like. They're still fun bikes to ride, so I would definitely consider them. Next up, there's another forgotten category. Late 90s, early 2000s, aluminium mountain bikes. Now these bikes have a more modern geometry, chunkier frames, so they look pretty funky. The other benefit is the frames are lighter. They actually ride pretty nicely. You have quite a big clearances for tires, so you can fit some chunky, nice tires on them. They're also not that collectible right now. They're kind of everyday bikes, so people don't see them as valuable at all. And that means you can pick them up for cheap. Now, the biggest negative about these bikes are the suspension forks. However, if you can find yourself a spare set of rigid forks, and you can pick them up from some of those 90s bikes for pretty much nothing, they're worth swapping out and changing them over to more rigid. Now, the other thing when you're looking to buy one, look out for cracks. Aluminium is nowhere near as sturdy as steel, so just make sure there's no cracks near the head tube and the bottom bracket. Small dents here and there, don't worry about it, just roll with it. Obviously, bigger dents and bigger damage, just avoid it altogether. Next type you should consider are the 90s performance mountain bikes. Now, back in the 90s, they started to mess around with the technology a lot. And by technology, I mean suspension. So you had this kind of crossover era where you had a whole bunch of rigid bikes, but then you started to have these bikes with suspension. Quite often, suspension bikes had a nicer components, more upmarket stuff. Now, these bikes, in my opinion, are not great for restomodding. They would be perfect for someone who wants to restore stuff back to the old glory. Reason I say that is the suspension was pretty shit back then and still is. So pretty much it's useless for any mountain biking. The looks are not as clean for your city cruisers, and the geometry was starting to be more performance-like. If you do pick up something and you are still keen to restomod it, I'd say lean into the mountain biking side of it. So slap a shorter stem, wider handlebars, put some chunkier tires, and these bikes are actually not that bad performance-wise. Just bear in mind that that front suspension is probably not going to do much. Now, these bikes are not as cheap, so yeah, see what you can find out there, and if restoring is more of your thing rather than modifying something, then go for it. And since we're talking about the 90s mountain bikes, this category is most common by far. This is what people, when they say, you know, retro mountain bike resto mod, that's what they think about. 90s rigid mountain bikes. They are everywhere. They're so versatile. And if you go on Instagram and search hashtag 26 ain't dead, you will see so much inspiration for these types of builds. The beautiful part is they're smack in the middle when it comes to the type of things you can do with them. So you can lean into the full-on cruiser style, and I love that. I have 3 of them myself. Or you can go down the performance, gravel cruiser, whatever you want to call it, the dirt jumper, you name it. Now, when looking at these bikes, the things I would look out for are original owners. That's when you usually can pick them up for cheaper. I would also say look for more of your local brands, like Specialized has been done to death. Over here in Australia, I'm kind of liking these Shoguns and Wheelers, so that's kind of my flavor. But whatever is local to your market, just pick them up. You don't need a Specialized or GT to have a cool ride. As for mods, let your imagination run wild. Like I said, check out the Instagram, just do some Googling and do whatever you feel like. The beautiful part, you can build yourself a cruiser, get bored with that, and then turn it into a gravel bike, all on the same frame, same platform. So you really can't go wrong. Pick up whatever is cheapest and whatever you can find around you, and then just roll with it. Now, the next category is a little bit forgotten, and we're talking about the retro hybrids. Now, these bikes don't get much love, but they probably should, because they're not far behind these 90s retro mountain bikes when it comes to the versatility and the coolness factor. They are from the same era, so they were practical, durable, and again, you can pick them up for pretty cheap. If you find something from earlier years, they come with either cantilever brakes or V-brakes, so usually you can fit quite chunky tires like I've did on this bike over here. They are perfect for gravel bike conversions. Larger 700C wheels give you larger range of tires you can choose from, and they roll over obstacles a lot easier. Now, when you're looking to buy one, I would say look for some of those early ones. As for mods, I would either turn them into a flat bar or gravel bike. Find them a little bit awkward for a cruiser. They're a bit taller bikes overall, but you can pretty much do whatever you feel like. Now, hybrids had this strange thing where in the early days they had the rigid forks and cantilever brakes, but then they started to put suspension on these bikes and just kind of ruined them. And then eventually more modern hybrids are all rigid as well. So I'm kind of curious to know, has anyone done restomod on more modern hybrid? What do they look like? I haven't done one yet on this channel, but I'm definitely keen to give it a go. So yeah, if you've done it before, let me know. Does it work? Did it look any good? What did it ride like? Because what I'm thinking here, man, these hybrids are everywhere, and that could be untapped gold mine for restomodding. And now for something a little bit faster and more city oriented, 80s road bikes. Now, these bikes have a lot of character. They used to come in pretty funky colors also. Back then, tubing wasn't too bad, so some of these actually come with a pretty decent tubing and you can pick them up for pretty cheap. People underprice them quite often and they're lumped in the same category as like a really cheap 80s bikes. So what you want to look out for is something with a more decent component. Shimano 600 was pretty okay back then, but make sure you watch out for rust and just the damage on some of those more higher end frames. Like if you find something that's actually pretty decent tubing, make sure it's not dented or bent. I've come across a couple of bikes now that are properly bent and they've been damaged, but people just don't realize. So with these bikes, geometry is pretty aggressive depending which model you get. Like this Kawahara I have is pretty twitchy bike to ride, but also quite fun. The gearing is quite often built for, I don't know who the hell they build them for. The sprockets are so tiny at the back, but you can always change that with something with more range around the city. Now, my favorite mod for these is the flat bars. I'm a mountain biker, so I find flat bars just nicer to ride. I don't use these bikes for a long commute either, so I just find them just nicer bikes to ride. They are a bit more limited for accessories, so you can't really hang off racks and stuff around them. But, you know, the messenger bag and yeah, they're cool bikes. Now, after 80s, it comes 90s. So 90s road bikes are my current favorites. The geometry has changed between 80s and 90s, and I find the 90s bikes just ride a bit nicer. They're again a lot cheaper, but components aren't as great. They're still steel, they're still classic, and obviously 90s, they started to put some funky colors, and I had a couple of them now that are pretty cool bikes. Now, when buying one, you can find these for quite cheap. People underprice them again, and they're a bit more forgiving than 80s bikes. The steel was a bit thicker back then. You can still find some higher end stuff, but these bikes I find are a lot more forgiving. You can easily modify them, same as the 80s bikes. They do fit slightly wider tires, although you will be limited with any of those on the width you can fit. 90s, you could probably fit about 28 mil, squeeze maybe 30 mil on some brands, but count on 28 mil as the widest you will go on tires. Down tube shifters just allow you again to modify the handlebars how you want. So again, I love flat bars, so that's what I roll with. You can play around with the rise. So I haven't done this on my builds yet, but I will play around a little bit with more of a riser bars, bit of a courier style kind of bikes. Yeah, I just find them more practical than fixies, but they still have that kind of cool look about them. Now with these bikes, obviously I'm not reinventing the wheel. They've been around for a while, and the kind of flavor about the resto-modding these bikes goes up and down. I did see someone comment the other day going, oh geez, are we back in the 2010s? Now to me, this is all new, so I'm loving modifying these bikes and restoring. You do you. I don't care what others are thinking. I think they're pretty cool bikes to ride, and I enjoy fixing them and modifying them and putting them back to use. Next type you should consider are early 2000s mountain bikes. Now, in my opinion, these bikes are seriously underrated. You can still buy them for cheap, they're easy to service, and they can be ridden quite hard. By then, their suspension wasn't too bad. They started to fix up a whole bunch of things. They're a lot more standardized when it comes to the parts interchangeability. And if you're a type of person that still wants a cool ride, so something kind of retro, but that's more capable than those early 90s mountain bikes, then definitely consider one of these. So these bikes can again be picked up for reasonably cheap. They're not as cheap as some of those early mountain bikes because these are now kind of looking like a normal bike, I guess. The reason why I like them is simplicity around them. They can be modernized quite easily. Honestly, just put wider handlebars and chunkier tires, and they're perfectly capable bikes. If you're into something retro, but don't want to put up with a whole bunch of old rusted parts, get something like this from this era. So now that you've seen these types, decide, what do you want? Performance, looks and style, something to restore, or do what I did and get them all. They're all cheap, they can all be done on a budget, and frankly, you can end up with about 10 bikes and still spend less than $500. And if you do decide to restore or resto mod one of these bikes, you may learn a thing or two about life that may surprise you, but that's another video.